All right, everybody. So we have some more sound devices that we're going to get to this week. And we're going to find out that most of these sound devices, they're going to be more about the structure of a poem. And that's what we're really going to get to this week is how we structure poetry or how poets have structured their poetry. And we're going to start with a couple of kind of esoteric, it means really rare sound devices that are going to get us into the sense of how we use these. So last week we talked about alliteration, which is very popular, where we're going to hear two consonant syllables at the beginning of words, like Sally sells seashells by the seashore. But this week we're going to talk about a very specific type of alliteration called assonance, another called consonants, that are really hard to spot. But they're actually really important for the structure of the poem. So we light fire. The repetition of vowel sounds in a series of words is what we call assonance. And so you can kind of get a sense for if I'm building out lines that have a lot of repeated I's, then I'm using assonance. And that's going to draw my audience's ear in a different way. I feel depressed and restless is another one where I don't want to use feel because feel and depressed sound different. The stress on feel is a capital E stress, and the stress on depressed is a lowercase e sound. Actually, I should have the other E, all the other E's in depressed underlined here. But we get a sense for, okay, so we have all of these different E sounds and they're riding through the line, right? So we get a kind of structure here, and that structure is appealing to the ear. Consonants is very much the same, where we have a repeat of a consonant sound. And so reject, project, these are eject, these are the same sound that's being repeated. Rap rejects my tape deck, ejects projectile. We're actually going to see a lot of this in rap. So we get a lot of same sound isms to create this kind of flow or this kind of pattern, right? And so again, we can kind of see whether Jew or Gentile, I took top percentile. We have a rhyme there, but we also have an entile. So we have a whole kind of sound going on that we're repeating throughout the line. So assonance and consonants, they're kind of like alliteration. They're more about building out these words in series and getting these sounds projected in structure. Speaking of structure, a refrain is the repetition of a line or phrase repeated throughout a song or a poem. If we're talking about a song and we talk about the refrain, that's the part of the song that repeats. So usually we have, the beginning of the song and then the bridge or the refrain and then the next verse and then the bridge of the refrain and then the third verse, and then we might end on the bridge of the frame, right? The refrain. Again, you can really see how this can work through a song or a poem and become kind of a ringing bell for us to know something. So another really famous example would be Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, where his refrain is I have a dream, and then the thing that comes after it, right, is part of that dream. And so we get this ringing bell, I have a dream, and then we have that my children will one day play with white children, right? I have a dream that, we can look up all the examples. I apologize for not knowing all the I have a dream speech off the top of my head. Repetition, again, we're going to repeat these lines, right? And repetition can work really similarly to refrain. Again, I'm going to use Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech because the repetition of that line becomes a structural element for the speech. And so refrain and repetition can be used almost interchangeably in some sense. I would say the big difference is a refrain is going to be maybe a complete thought or a complete theory of a series of lines, and repetition is going to be these starters. That we get a repeat of something that starts something, and then the next thought is different. So one of the really powerful things about repetition is that we recall, okay, I have a dream, and then the next part of it is the part to pay attention to. So it can kind of wake up an audience who might be sleeping on a song or a speech or a poem. Parallel structure or parallelism is using the same pattern of words to show that ideas have the same level of importance. And so Mary likes to hike, to swim, to ride a bike, or Mary likes to hike, swim, and ride a bicycle. We want to use, when we're having these kind of series, the same phrasing or the same clause level. This is something that we see in poetry quite often, where we get that two. Excuse me. Products of a live lecture. So we get that two as a structure, a parallel structure, and if you want to think about it, parallel lines run concurrently, right, from left to right, and they never touch. So we have equal representation of ideas. We also apply a lot of these things to everyday writing and everyday communication. So it would sound really weird if we said Mary likes to hike, swim, and to ride a bike. We're just misrepresenting the language there, and it sounds off because we're misrepresenting our language. So parallel structure is another just structural aspect of how we use our language, and a really powerful one at that. So what happens when we put some of these elements together and we put together concepts like structure? Well, if we put together concepts like structure, then we're going to get structured poetry. And structured poetry just means that it has a lot of rules that it has to follow. So this is a Shakespearean sonnet, or what we might refer to as an Elizabethan sonnet, so named for Shakespeare because he was kind of a master at them, writing, I think, 141 distinct sonnets. That was in his free time when he couldn't write plays. So what is a Shakespearean sonnet? Well, all sonnets have to have 14 lines. All sonnets have to have 7 sounds. And a Shakespearean sonnet is going to say the sound pattern has to be A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So what does that mean? That means that as we run through the poem, we should, at the end of the first line, hear an A sound. Well, that's always going to be the case. We're going to hear a different sound at the end of the second line. We're going to hear the first sound repeated at the end of the third line, and then the second sound repeated at the end of the fourth line. This is a stanza. Now we're going to have a new stanza, and we're going to have another pattern with 2 different sounds. Break, another pattern with 2 different sounds. Break, and then we're going to end with the same 2 sounds. So what do we call this? Well, we call these quatrains. Quat means 4. So we have 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. Couplet means 2. And we're actually, Shakespeare is going to do something interesting with this couplet. He's going to create a different idea along with the different sound. And so there's a lot of rules that you have to follow inside of sonnets. I'm not going to get into iambic pentameter and all that stuff. That's a little too much. I think that kind of drains all the fun out of it. Too much math for me. But understanding that there are all these rules is going to be really important, and we are going to encounter a Shakespearean sonnet this week. Voice, we're kind of getting to this, what makes the poet distinctive, and so why am I putting this in here with our sound devices? Well, voice is really the style of the poet. Do they use similar structures? Do they use similar moods or tones? And so even if you're not finding any of the other aspects in your poems, I would want you to look at what is the poet's voice. So how do I do that? Well, I look up other poems by that poet and see, are there some similarities in how this poet is writing? Shakespeare, for example, is going to have a lot of similarities because he's going to use the same structure over and over and over again. He's going to use a lot of the same ideas and moods and etc. And he's gonna use a lot of repeat throughout his work, and that's going to help us understand something about the author's voice. We're not going to get into symbol. A lyrical poem, I just want to end with this. I'm not sure if we're going to take a paper test, but the paper test has this question on lyrical poems, and it's just a poem that expresses the speaker's emotions or thoughts. And sonnets would be a good example of lyrical poems. Again, when we get to the word lyrical, we're probably thinking about sing-songy in some way. And that's not too far off the base either. It's going to have that measured, structured, almost sing-song quality because of the rhyme scheme.